please join me with a loud welcome for President Bill Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States.
Thank you. First of all, I'm so happy to be here. I will never get tired of thanking Michigan for voting for me twice. And we thank you for saying that. And I love coming here. I love going all over the state. It's so different, and I'm honored to be here with your Congresswoman, whose name I love, Hillary Colson. You know, it's great. My Hillary and I just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary, and she reminded me of why I think Gretchen Whitmer will always be a great governor. I said, you know, we've been together 49 years. I think I'm about to get the hang of it. And she said, you're doing better. And I thought that's a classic example of why women have an extra responsibility gene, as Hillary always says. And Gretchen Whitmer has it, and so does Kamala Harris. And I want to thank Bishop and Mrs. Burrell. I want to thank all the local officials who are here, Representative Will Snyder, Mayor Bonnie McLaughlin, thank you. County Democratic Chair Larry Jackson, Muskegon County Democratic Chair Jason Coella, and thank you to one of the first 3 governors who endorsed me when I started running in late 1991, Jim Blanchard. Thank you for being here. You did a great job. So, I spent 4 days in rural South Carolina, and 4 days North Carolina, and 4 days in rural Georgia. And I just spent a day going around western Pennsylvania. And I'm going to be I think we're doing 5 stops here in Michigan today. And when Vice President Harris called Hillary and me, and they've known each other for 30 years, but I've only known her for a few years. But she called me and she said, I want you to help. And I said, I'll be low maintenance. I don't care if I'm ever on television. Because what I think former presidents are best for is going places where presidents don't show up all that often. And sending a message to people that everyone deserves to be heard. And that whoever it is they're trying to help is making sure that they're heard. And so I said, so I like this. But I do want to say that I decided to do this for only one reason. I don't want anything. I don't want an appointment. I don't want. You know what I want? I want to assure the American dream for my grandchildren. I don't want my 10-year-old granddaughter to have fewer freedoms than her 44-year-old mother. Can you believe Chelsea's 44? And about to run in her 3rd New York Marathon. So I want that. And I remember, I know this is in a place where there are a lot of members of the other party, and I hope there are some Republicans here today. But I was with former Congressman Joe Walsh from Illinois yesterday, a Republican who's campaigning for Kamala Harris. And I was reminded of the difference in Donald Trump's roots and Joe Walsh, or even Lynn Cheney. Trump's father hired as his political organizer or guru Roy Cohn, who was Senator Joe McCarthy's main advisor. And Roy Cohn was an interesting fellow. He was Jewish and he was gay, both of which are fine with me. But Roy Cohn ran campaigns against Jews and gay people. He was an anti-Semitic homophobe who was Jewish and gay. But he had one constant message. Whatever they charge you with, deny it, deny everything. And always accuse other people of doing what you're doing. Does that sound familiar? So, I don't know about his time in business school, but Donald Trump proved to be a good student of Roy Cohn. Deny everything. Never admit error, ever. And accuse other people of doing what you're doing. And do it with energy and sanctimony. President Ford, when he was in Congress, and even before, was more of an acolyte of President Eisenhower, who finally figured out how to maneuver Joe McCarthy to his demise without wrecking the coalition that was his party. And when I was a schoolboy, we were all taught that Eisenhower, his great warning in his farewell address was that America should not build a military-industrial complex that runs the country to the point of getting us involved in unnecessary wars and putting our democracy at risk. That was like our little lesson. But Eisenhower, it turned out, left us another message, which I just discovered literally a couple of years ago, everything he said about this. After World War II, he began to talk to his friends about how hard it was going to be to save American democracy. And he said, I'm really worried about it. He said, we're already the longest lasting continuous democracy in history. But he said, it just requires so much effort for people in their lives. Look at the lives all of you have. He says, it's really hard to keep up with what's going on and to understand what's a real threat and what's not, and to vote to stay the course that the Constitution laid out. And he said, I just don't know how long we're going to make it. And so here, I think we ought to say to General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, we don't know how long we're going to make it either, but we're fixing to lengthen our stay in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Look, even as we close down here, you get to the election, there's still a few votes to be made. And there's a lot of votes to be drawn out. And a lot of people still think, well, it doesn't really matter. And it really matters. And so I just want to say a couple of things. I want you to know why I'm here enthusiastically. And why I did actually repeatedly ask to go to the Heartland. Because I don't like it when we don't get along, and I don't like it when we are supposed to be mad at our neighbors. And I know a lot of people who are Trump supporters. And even in my little town where we're going to give him a big thumping in New York. But I know a lot of them. And it's amazing how many of them have gotten all caught up in all this identity politics and see the rest of us as some sort of mortal threat to them. But the ones I know, they're good people. If you were living next door to them and your house caught on fire, they'd come over and put the fire out and help you get the kids out and do whatever. But they are obsessed with this sense that we are somehow worlds away from them, and they think it's okay to demean, divide, attack. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. Who does this? Yeah. And you just think what it would be like. Well, here's the best I know. Here we're in the middle of football season, in the middle of pro football season. We're in the middle, yeah, and you got a great team. The Lions are doing great. And we're watching the World Series, and you know, I'm a New Yorker. I support the home team, so we survived. We didn't get swept, at least. Now think about why we all like these contests and how we can talk about them and fight with each other and then marvel about it all when it's over. Why do we like it? Because number one, they're exciting. Number two, they reward talent. Number three, we're all playing the game under the same set of rules. And so, yeah, every now and then, an umpire or a referee makes a mistake. They join the human race. Nobody's perfect, but they're trying to, and we've now got some correctives with the football replay and the baseball monitors. And they, you know, we try to live under the same set of rules. And the only great area of contest where we don't do that all the time is that the modern MAGA Republicans, the last thing they want to do is live under the same set of rules. And so what happens? We wind up fighting with each other, not trusting each other, and undermining our ability to do great things. Like, look at the good football teams. Look at the good baseball teams. You've got tiny little Mookie Betts, and, you know, great big Aaron Judge and all those other people. Diverse groups make better decisions than homogeneous ones, don't they? And so I want to make three brief points. You did pretty well when I was president, and I think I'm entitled to my opinion about who'd be better. Two, I don't think it's right to say that people have to vote for Donald Trump because the economy was better there. I don't believe that. And 3, I think you owe it to the rest of the world and to your own families and to everybody in between to preserve the Constitution and keep us going forward. Now, the authoritarian MAGA crowd has made it clear that the definition of a good administration under Trump would be to fill every single position, from the Supreme Court on down to the cabinet on down, every one, people who are unquestionably loyal. That is, when they ask you that old joke line, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? You will always answer, you, master. They've made it absolutely clear. And I think that is a recipe for disaster. Because nobody knows everything, and a broken clock is right twice a day. So we all spend our whole lives trying to get further away from the broken clock and closer to being right all the time, knowing we'll never get there. And we need other people who have different life experiences, who have different, areas of knowledge. We need that. And that's one reason I believe Kamala Harris will be a better president than Donald Trump. Running it. And don't minimize that. Don't minimize that. I was the second youngest person elected president and the third youngest to serve. Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest, and he was vice president, and President McKinley was killed. And the first week I was there, because I had all these great young people who worked in my campaign, one of whom, Gene Sperling from Michigan, is behind that curtain. And he was an essential economic advisor to me, to Barack Obama, to Joe Biden, and to Kamala Harris. Where is he? Come here. This is enter the deep state the Republicans are always crying about. I used to go running down the mall in Washington when I was young and speedier. And this young woman came up to me one day when I was running on the mall and started criticizing me because it turned out she was going out with Gene and she thought he was working too hard and not available to her. So I had to go home and I was properly chastened. I did want to bring him out because I love him and he never tries to get any credit. But I remember Hillary said to him once, said, Gene, you've got all these new ideas. I've got a new one for you. Sleep. You need to try to get some sleep. There never was anybody that I ever knew who worked longer hours, worked harder, trying to help every American get and keep a decent job. And I think that's an important thing. But he was there in the room. Everybody had, that's good. So, Governor Whitmer has an aide back there named Terry Krenvik who helped me get started when I left the White House. And I was morose when she left me because she was a good golfer and I could learn something from her. My point is, all these people are people, but I got them in the Oval Office. And I said to them, I want the young people here to remember. One of the reasons I got elected is that I was the longest serving governor in the country. so that I might not be from a big state, I might not be super rich, but I have made a bunch of decisions. I have made a bunch of mistakes, and I've made a bunch of good ones. But what I know is, if any one of you in this audience ever come in to see me in the Oval Office and just tell me what you think I want to hear, we might as well shut the operation down and run the place with a computer. Nobody will ever be dismissed or diminished or sidelined for telling me what I don't want to hear. Now, if I listen and we work through it and I still make a decision you don't agree with, the honorable thing is not to backstab everybody you work with. The honorable thing is to resign, and if you do, I will give you a terrific recommendation. And thank you, and tell everybody that you have served democracy well. Trump has made clear that if he gets to be president, there ain't gonna be no recommendations for people who disagree with him. Loyalty first, last, and always. The loyalty should extend to somebody who gives you a job, but it is rooted in your loyalty to the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. So that's one reason I'm for her. Second thing is, her economic plan is better than his. It's just better. And they're saying, if you listen to Trump, they basically say, you did well when I was president, and we had no inflation, therefore you have to vote for me. Isn't that what they basically say? And you probably talked to a lot of your neighbors who say that. Well, the first thing I want to tell you is, the reason President Trump had a couple of good years early is that he inherited the tail end of Obama's recovery. And something magic happened. You remember, Trump is the best guy I ever saw to claim credit. He's the best credit claimer I've ever seen. I mean, you've heard him maybe. The sun rose this morning, I made that happen. But it rained yesterday. If I had been president, it never would have rained. I mean, you got to give it to the guy. He's really good at this. But here's the thing. When you're used to something good happening or something bad happening, it sometimes takes longer for public opinion, for people to feel and believe that it's changed. For example, we had run deficits since 1969 in every year when I was running for president. And I said, look, this debt thing has got out of hand with trickle-down economics. Interest rates are too high. It's keeping middle-class incomes down. It's increasing poor people's problems, and we should grow this economy from the middle out and the bottom up, and this is how we're going to do it. Well, and I warned people. I said, to do this, to really get rid of the deficit, we're going to have to raise some money, and we're going to have to cut some spending. And it's going to be like going to the dentist without any painkillers. And you just got to be willing to do it. If you vote for me, that's what I'm going to do, because it's the right thing to do. And nobody likes it, but we've got to do it to get the country's economy going. And you might remember that we got thumped in the midterms in 1994 because nobody felt it was happening. It was 3 full years after we started bringing down the deficit that people would say it was happening. But my margin of victory in Michigan, for example, between 1992 and 1996 went from 8 to 13 points. So I did 5 better. But it took time. And I woke up in a cold sweat for 15 years. I swear I did, having bad dreams about all the people who lost their careers because they had to stand for re-election before people felt the change. So in the 2016 election, the economy was already roaring, but people didn't feel it yet. So they felt it in 2016, and there was Trump there to take the credit for something he never was for. And he is gambling that he can do it again. I'm telling you, if you mean that, then you need to get on the phone and you need to show up and you need to do all this work. Because I'm telling you, I have lived this. I know what it's like to get caught having to face the voters when things have already changed for the better and people don't know it. What's the cost of living issue? Basically, food, fuel, and housing and health care, right? Okay. We are about to finish 4 years, which produced the largest number of jobs in any 4-year period in the history of the United States of America. But people don't necessarily feel that yet because we've had a return of inflation for the first time in 40 years. And it's debilitating. But it was unavoidable. Why? Every rich country's faced it. Because COVID busted all the supply chains. So let's just take your hometown here. Suppose the city council decided that we can't afford the fuel and we're having terrible trouble. So from now on, the only kind of transportation we'll have in the city limits are little motorcycles, little ones. No gas, but so that's where we're going to go around. And we'll have those for people who are disabled. They'll have big basket carts. We'll figure out how everybody got a place to ride. Okay, and suppose that there's a guy here who sells them. And he's got, and all he can get his hands on are 500. And there are umpty-dump thousand of you that now have to buy them. So if the price is, the demand is here and the supply is here, what's going to happen to the price? That's what happened. But when things calmed down and the supply chains were beginning to be rebuilt, the food prices didn't really drop. It's just that the rate of inflation went up. So what you want to know is how much of this is due to continuing problems in the supply chain and how much of it is due to the fact that most groceries are part of big chains today. And they have tens of millions of customers. So if their profit margin goes up literally 1%, it'll all come out of your hide and it'll make a huge difference to them. So Kamala Harris, who was Attorney General of California, said 37 states have price gouging laws. But they're not big enough to take on the chains. So we're going to have a national price gouging law, and the Justice Department can monitor this every week. They can see what's happening so that you don't pay more than you have to pay, and we get the benefit of the prices going down. And that's important. And it's not expensive, it's not big, and it can be really meaningful. On the fuel, it's the one thing we do notice immediately, don't we? Gas prices go down, we notice that. So this is really important. So what's been the Biden-Harris policy? all of the above, essentially, which is all the clean stuff, solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, even some small-scale nuclear that I think is safe because these little tablets or pellets are covered in ceramic and will last for hundreds of years without damaging the ground. And we still don't have enough of everything else, and so she favors natural gas, but with very high standards for mining and building the pipelines. Otherwise, you lose everything. You have, if the pipelines leak, you have methane, and that's a bigger greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. What's Trump's policy? Trump's policy, as reported widely in the press, and he did agree, this is what he said. He talked to the oil industry moguls and said, you have to give me $1 billion. And if you give me $1 billion, I will get rid of every energy decision made in the Biden years. I'll get rid of all of them. Now, that's a very big deal because if we go back to nothing but oil and gas and coal, we will not produce enough energy to meet our needs. We will not have nearly as many jobs as we've got in clean energy in most states. And we'll pay a terrible price environmentally and health-wise. So hers is better. Her position is better. We'll have more jobs and a brighter future if we do all of the above and we're careful with our children's environmental future than if we just, lean into yesterday, which is what they want to do. So that's another reason I'm for Harris instead of Trump. So you know this. But I promise you, there are people here who are worried about this. And I'll just say one last thing, because it's a big thing in Michigan. I think it's important that we continue to be a leader in the world for freedom and human rights and decency. I say, when I'm not on the campaign trail, I wear a Ukrainian flag in my lapel every day. And my foundation used to run the AIDS program in Ukraine, and they're amazing people. They do not deserve what has happened to them. And it is a consequence of political and economic greed. So we need to stand up for freedom everywhere. Mr. Trump admires dictators. He admires Putin and the president of North Korea, who now wants to go fight the Ukrainians. Bad for their brand, if Ukraine is free. And that's another reason I'm for Harris. We want to be on the side of freedom. Now, let me talk about the hardest issue here in Michigan is the Middle East. And I have to be careful what I say because there's only one president at a time, and none of us can get ahead of where we're going. But I think we're going to have to essentially start again on the peace process. And I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. I get that. But if you lived in one of those kibbutzim in Israel, right next to Gaza, where the people there were the most pro-friendship with Palestine, most pro-two-state solution of any of the Israeli communities, were the ones right next to Gaza. And Hamas butchered them. And so then the people who criticize it are essentially saying, yeah, but look how many people you've killed in Ritalin. So how many is enough for you to kill to punish them for the terrible things they did? That all sounds nice until you realize, what would you do if it was your family and you hadn't done anything but support a homeland for the Palestinians, and one day they come for you and slaughter the people in your village? You would say, well, you'll have to forgive me, I'm not keeping score that way. It isn't how many we've had to kill, because Hamas makes sure that they're shielded by civilians. They'll force you to kill civilians if you want to defend yourself. And look, I worked on this hard. And the only time Yasser Arafat didn't tell me the truth was when he promised me he was going to accept the peace deal that we had worked out, which would have given the Palestinians a state on 96% of the West Bank and 4% of Israel, and they got to choose where the 4% of Israel was. So they would have the effect of the same land of all the West Bank. They would have a capital in East Jerusalem. They would have I can hardly talk about this. And they would have equal access all day, every day, to the security towers that Israel maintained all through the West Bank up to the Golden Heights. All this was offered, including, I will say it again, a capital in East Jerusalem and 2 of the 4 quadrants of the old city of Jerusalem, confirmed by the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and his cabinet. And they said no. And I think part of it is that Hamas did not care about a homeland for the Palestinians. They wanted to kill Israelis and make Israel uninhabitable. Well, I got news for them. They were there first. Before there was, their faith existed, they were there. In the time of King David, and the southernmost tribes had Judea and Samaria. But the whole fight that you have seen played out was present in the beginning for Israel. 2 parties, Likud and Labor. Likud says, we want the whole West Bank because we had it in the time of David, and to heck with whoever came later and other things. Labor said, we will take what the United Nations has offered us, and we will make a garden in the desert. And we will have friends, and we will work through it. And they did. David Ben-Gurion. They're still fighting this fight today. And so here's what I want to tell you. I'm going to do everything I can to convince people that they cannot murder their way out of this, neither side. You can't kill your way out of this. And they have to make a new beginning. But when I read that people in Michigan are thinking about not voting because they're mad at the Biden administration for honoring his historic obligation to try to keep Israel from being destroyed, I think that's a mistake. Because Donald Trump has shown what he wants. And I don't think it's, and he claims it's good for Israel, but I don't think it is. I think we still have to find a way to share the future. We cannot kill our way out of conflicts. But we do have to fight our way to safety. And make no mistake about it, we've got now Iran, a Shia state, the Hezbollah, a Shia sect, the Houthis, a Shia sect, now with Hamas, a Sunni Arab operation, united in thinking the only thing that we have to do is run every Jew out of Israel. And I'm sorry, but I'm not for that. I think that is wrong. It violates everything we've stood for. And in the end, it won't be good for the Palestinian people. I'll never forget Arafat, when he promised me he was going to take this deal we worked out. He always was fighting with Prime Minister Barak, and I said, wait a minute. I said, you think I care about the Palestinian children? And he said, oh, much more than the Arabs do. He said, they only care about us when they need to blame America and Israel for their people being upset in the streets. This is far more complicated than you know. And all I ask you to do is to keep an open mind. But Kamala Harris has said that she will try to negotiate an end to the violence, an end to the killing, and a new peace process. And that ought to be enough. Okay. Go out there and win this election. I'm telling you, you will be proud of yourself for the rest of your days if we win this election and Michigan leads the way. Thank you.